Well, good evening, folks. What are we now? Sunday the 27th. A bloody cold, windy day in UK. It's absolutely pissing down. So I thought I'd do a quick video. Got a lot to do. Um, but a difficult topic, really. But it's got to be said. You know, like all things, if I saw something wrong with you, I'd tell you. Only because I love you, you know, because you probably want to know. So with that in mind, I'm just saying what my take is of the current state of play and how we've ended up in this mess on our world. And I'm no oracle. I can only say what I see and evaluate it and give you my thoughts about that evaluation and why I think like that. There are certain terms or words I've been called, I suppose. One of them's a bigot. Hypocrite, bigot, you name it, I've been called it. And yeah, I think we all have in one time in our lives been accused of being something we're not by those who look to hurt us, or as they say, it's sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me, or something like that. Well, they do hurt. They hurt more than sticks and stones being thrown at you, because you'll get over the pain of an immediate assault from a stick or a stone. But words last a lifetime, and they can fester. So words are probably the most powerful things to use as a weapon in our world. And yet we're led to believe sticks and stones, yada yada yada, but words will never hurt me. You know, as though it makes a slight. It's what we say to our children when they're being picked on at school, and never mind, you know, because we're all obsessed with this business about being physically hurt. But the more terrible hurt inflicted upon human beings is the word. And this is even stated way back in the biblical texts, you know. Well, the one thing is that the truth won't necessarily set you free. And I think we've all been in a situation where we've heard hurtful words and they sting, they truly do. And especially if they're untrue and unkind. And the reason I'm mentioning this groundwork, I suppose, initially, is to perhaps explain to you why we're in such a mess, human beings. And we are in a mess. And I personally believe that, well, we're a long way to being perfect. And I don't think we ever will be. What we can do is strive to be, but then you get disenchanted with the whole thing and you think, do you know what, sod it, what's the point? You know, I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of them. You know, we've been there. And it'll result in a smack in the face off them to you, or you've offended them to such an extent they're never going to speak to you again, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter who you're talking to, quite frankly. But if you look at the power of words, they are incredibly strong. They start wars. They make people fall in love with you. Or make them fall, they make them fall in love with you. They can be put into songs and sung to children to get them to fall asleep, comfort. They're used for all sorts, these weapons that we call words. And they're the most powerful weapons known to man. And it's very important to grasp just how powerful these words are. And yet, some people use words that are a categorical lie, fabrication of the events or their thoughts or their feelings or the whatever they want to convey, a lie, a thin shell of truth often stuffed with a lie. So it's difficult for us to differentiate between truth and a lie sometimes, isn't it? It's a slippery little sucker. And if you're going to lie, tell it between two truths. That's often the advice of a professional liar. And God, I've met a few. So the reason I'm mentioning this is that I've often been accused of being a racist, as I previously mentioned, and anti-Semitic. Yeah. Am I? Yes, to a degree. And I'm just being brutally honest with you. Because that's the way I roll. I'd rather be honest. I don't particularly like what Judaism stands for. I don't blame the Jewish people, per se, on an individual basis, of nailing and betraying and nailing Jesus on the cross for the Romans at all. It's not a religious thing for me. But I don't like people who think they're better than me just because they happen to worship in a different way, and I don't tend to worship. I'm often stunned at the magnificence of our world and the creations of such things that are upon it. But you don't have to be religious to appreciate. You don't have to be an art critic or an art expert to appreciate a fabulous painting or beautiful drawing. It's innate in every one of us to appreciate the finer things in life if we're exposed to them, and welcome them, into our lives, or dismiss repellent events and people and art and literature. It's the way we roll because we're not born evil. Okay, we are made evil. It's like having a book with blank pages. And over time, our life book is filled out by events, circumstance, other people's influence, parental influence, big. Religious influence is big. And the book soon starts to fill up. And then you start to add to the pages and the text, and you're making your own story as you start to get off four legs, dangle around on two, and then start running once you can walk. And by the end of it, the book closes, we drop dead, and it's good night Vienna. And then people can look at your book and see how you've developed, and this sort of thing. The life book, if you like. But I was watching, as is my wont when I want mental chewing gum, this wonderful female, Judge Judith Sheindlin. Okay. And I have to confess, it makes my skin crawl. Because I'll tell you why. Is I know as a nation, the Jews are usually very dominant. This is not an anti-Semite or anti-Jewish video, folks. Okay, let's make that quite clear. It's a mere observation. Right or wrong, I think it's right, but there we are. I've been wrong once or twice in my life. And I look and I think, well, okay, this is the thing. This is what it's put into Jewish children very young. And there are different types of Judaism. Obviously, there's extremes like everything else. And there's mild Judaism. And there's, it's a full spectrum, if you like. And it's the same in the Church of England. And it's, so we're not picking on the Jews. But one thing that Jews are actually world renowned for, is their ability to handle money. And this is their want in life, because they're conditioned from a very early age to respect the power of money. It was also the Jews that created usury on money. Two very important facts. I'm sure if it wasn't going to be the Jews that created usury, some other lot would have sooner or later latched onto the idea. But they were early adopters. Should we leave it at that? But the other thing that Jews are very famous for is that they generally only deal with one another. And they're involved in money, of course. They're involved in anything precious like diamonds and other commodities. They're great traders. But they generally, rarely, if ever, make a profit off one another. It's an unwritten law that you don't rip your fellow Jew off at all. You only rip what they call the goyim, non-Jews, animals less than animals, off. That's okay. We're fair game, you see, the goyim. So, ripping off in many ways, whether you give them, justice, for example, where you would perhaps be a little bit more lenient to those that you know are Jewish than you would to somebody you know who's a Christian or an Arab, particularly because they are arch rivals. Rather strange, really, when you consider the history of Judaism and where the Jews actually originally came from. Egypt, I believe. The same as the Italians, Egypt. Yes, and many, many French, Egypt. Take a close look at the genetics and the facial features for that one. So the Mediterranean, if you like, is swamped with the bloodline from Egypt. It sunk, didn't it come down? Anyway, digress. But I was watching Judge Judy Scheindlin, and I know her name to be Jewish. She's from a Jewish stock, and they tend to intermarry, keeping it in the family, because the one thing is they don't want their gene pool diluted. And they don't want their wealth diluted. In fact, they often marry into money. Oh, you're getting married to him? Yes, Forsyth, yes. How much money has he got in the bank? That's the big thing. It's a standing joke. I'm not being horrible, but there we are. It is. Because the goyim, us, we don't put such importance on money. We should, but we don't. Because there are other finer things in life, but not for the Jewish people. And I'm watching Scheindlin, and I look at the plaintiff, the one who's making the complaint in the court, and at the defendants. And, depending what the situation is, the names come up of the defendants and the plaintiffs. And I cannot contain the thought, well, I can contain the thought, whether I cannot avoid making the assumption that even when the defendant is in the wrong and he's absolutely banged to rights for being a bastard or ripping someone off, right? The plaintiff could be Mr. Jones, okay? And the defendant could be Reginald Bernstein, as guilty as hell, but and the plaintiff is quite justified in trying to get his money back, or feels aggrieved by his opposition, the criminal. And it's a dead set case. It's guaranteed, isn't it, that this defendant is going to lose the case. Now, that may be, as usually the case, if there's any justice in the world, get the word. But there is a fine imposed at the end of it. the guy will, Judge Judy will sit there and look around. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, guilty. Right, is another. Oh my God, She's therefore had to find a fellow Jew guilty. Beyond shadow of a doubt, guilty. And I can't help thinking, rightly or wrongly, I feel like I'm in confession, that she's more lenient. Often. It's in her blood to be lenient to a fellow Jew. And is that right or wrong? That's the question. Does it happen? Well, I've seen it happen quite a few times. She's very lenient to anyone she discovers has Jewish ancestry or Jewish surname, even if the woman had her name changed because she's married a Jewish man. She's far more lenient on Jewish defendants, and she's far more generous on Jewish plaintiffs. Now, is that in imagination? No, not really. I've made a note of making a note. And if you watch Judge Judy, check it out. Because they will always look after themselves. It's an unwritten law. They can't write it down in case it's discovered, but us Goyim notice such things. And, okay, they're into diamonds, they're into anything that's valuable and can be traded. Particularly traded with each other at preferential rates, because they don't charge each other interest, by the way. But then they will trade with the Goyim, the non-Jews, and rip as a new ass on many occasions. So this is why I don't like I dislike much about Judaism. Because this is an elitist. If it was a sport, it would be an elitist sport. But they have these delusions of grandeur. They even call themselves, wrongly, the chosen people. By who? Jesus is a fiction. There's no proof whatsoever that a man called Jesus of Nazareth walked around doing the gospel. It's a fiction, folks. Am I a blasphemer? Strike me. I don't know. Well, I know. There is no records of this man called Jesus. None. There's absolutely no proof. It's not even mentioned. Not once. Is it? In the sacred scrolls of the world. In fact, I think the first Bible was written 40 AD, allegedly after the death of such a person. And there's so many variations on a theme. Pick a Bible, pick your belief pattern, pick your poison, your mental poison. But the purveyors of such bullshit is how to grandiose the story that it all happened in Jesus of Nazareth, and yes, and he was a Hebrew, and yada yada yada. It's all about God's. Yes, Moses came down from the friggin' mountain. Moses. The only reference to a man called Moses in any ancient text was as an Egyptian pharaoh. Now there's a turn up for the books. And they never wondered that Moses parted the sea. Oh, come on. But Moses, from my understanding and research, has shown that he was an Egyptian pharaoh who was cast out. And he was the one wandering around looking for something to cling on to. And can you imagine? He stood there, he took the command of God, and it emblazoned all this 10 commandments. Just 10? That's a bit mean, isn't it? I can list 100 things that man should not do. But 10, that's a bit lenient. Ah, yes, your starter for 10, the commandments. What about the other 990 that I can think of? Yet we believe this. Oh, we're supposed to take it on the chin that looking at what, am I a Holocaust denier, my boy? No, not at all. But it wasn't just the Jews who suffered in the concentration camps. And they'd had to obviously revise the 6 million Jews got gassed in the chambers. No, they weren't. Sorry, they weren't. They've had to drop that figure considerably, and it wasn't. No doubt people died in the concentration camps through overwork and no food, slave labour, and extreme conditions. And there were tortures and they were worked to death. Absolutely. It wasn't just the Jewish people, was it? But they've got to make some money out of all this and get reparations. Never again must this happen to the Jewish people. What about never again must it happen to people per se? No, but it's only the Jews that walk around pulling out these numbers on their arm like a cash point machine. And it's not only that the sufferers at the hands of those in the concentration camps, the sufferers, the Jews that were released, they get compensation. But their great grandchildren will get it. What on earth for? Only they could milk a system like that because it's their money. I think they should give them a little goblet, a little metal, like a little key, like an anniversary key. Here's gold, silver, bronze, blah, 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 every 20 years as a remembrance, lest we forget. And we're not allowed to forget, are we? No. We'll never forget because they keep bringing it up time and time and time again. But there's so many other atrocities. Look at what the Japanese did to our prisoners of war. Huh? Nasty bastards. Oh yes, but we trade with Japan. We never mention the war to the Japanese, do we? The Pearl Harbor, which was a arranged deal anyway. They knew that was going to happen quite by design. That was a set-up by the bloody politicians and banksters to expedite the war and bring America into it. Oh yeah. What a horrible, corrupt nest of vipers these people are. And yet, Jews own America. They truly do. It's the United Jewish States. It truly is. And I'm supposed to be racist. Is it racist to want justice for the Palestinian people? No, I don't have a dog in the race, but I think it's an unfairness. I think it's a war crime, quite frankly, and the Balfour Declaration is a complete fabrication. And they had no right to do it. Well, who benefited? Well, who benefited from the state of Israel? Israel want their cake and they eat it. They have a go at people about being anti-Semitic and racist, yada, yada, yada. But if you are not a Jew, you can't go and live in the state of Israel. But they want to come and live in yours. Well, that's a base of unfairness, isn't it? Huh? Because they always want something for nothing. And that something is coming from you, who will end up with nothing. And this is what the way the world is going. If you look at the 5%ers of our world, I can guarantee 3% of that 5, guaranteed, if not all of it, are Jewish. In one way or another. But that's not being anti-Semitic, it's a straight observation, probably backed up by masses and masses of hidden history. Lest we forget, who betrayed the man on the cross, if that's your thing. They would sell their granny if there was a shekel in it. There is no future in the humans of this world, folks. None. Until we stop this nonsense of money and what it is the root, it truly is the root of all evil on this world. This currency we call money. Because there's always going to be those that have and always those that don't have. And then there's a grievance between the two parties, so there's going to be a war. And this is what is supposed to be. We are a warring world, and we will never, never, never have total peace on this world. We are a violent species, and we have wedges put between every man, jack and one of us, whether it be through skin colour, racism, religion's just another name, isn't it? It's just another wedge. Religion. Political beliefs. You've got the Arabs, you know, that we will never have peace on this world. It's a pipe dream. Do you know the only things that enjoy peace on this world, really, are the plants and animals. And we're supposed to be the clever ones. Nobody's born, generally, to be a nasty bastard, girl or boy. We're not. We learn it. And it's a criminal offence to teach bigotry and hatred and zealotry and, well, you're not allowed to play with him because he's an Arab. You're not allowed to play with him because she's black. It should be a criminal offence. And until we make it such and frown upon such behaviour, we will always have borders. And while we've got borders, we'll always have hatred. But unfortunately, the way the world is designed, with the countries and the borders, we're taking the borders away. But it's too late, the damage has been done. When you're into, I'll give you an example. I used to breed show quality canaries. Yellow t-shirt. I'm not going to sing for you. Okay, Yorkshire canaries. Big canaries by standard. Quite long, beautiful singers. This is when I was probably, I don't know, early 20s. I had an aviary full of these things and I spent a fortune on getting good stock. And I love the Yorkshire canary. It's a beautiful shape. It's quite a big canary. Because canaries come in different sizes, I don't know if you know this, and different colours, and not just all yellow. But I like the yellow ones, I'm a traditionalist. But I like the Yorkshires, fundamentally, because I'm Yorkshire myself. Born, bred and buttered. But then I think, well, okay, I've got a nice male, a cock, an unfortunate title, I grant you. The male is often called the cock. And the first thing I have to do then, because they start these cocks, how do you know they're in breeding condition? One is they sing their little hearts out around about April, March, April. They start to get their new coat on them and they start to sing. And it's only generally the males that sing. The women twitter, well, nothing changes. But the male canaries sing their little hearts out in order to attract a female, which will be provided by yours truly. So I think, that cock's ready, excuse it, but it's, we'll say he's ready. I'll have to find him a mate. So I go out in hunt and I buy a female canary who just chirps away. If I bung her in the cage with this you know, Yorkshire male canary, there will be a fight like you cannot believe. There'll be feathers everywhere. He would have blown it because he's territorial, because he's segregated in a part of a cage, and he knows that there's another cage, but there's a border between them and they can see each other. And what you do is you get her in one cage, half the cage, and him in another. You put a wooden sheet across them both, but you let them hear one another. She chirps, he sings. She chirps, he sings. Leave it for a few days like that. He's aware that he's on a promise, and she's aware that there's a cock next door. Yes, keeping it clean. What you then do is you pull the partition back about half an inch so they can't get the head in, otherwise they decapitate themselves, but just so they can look like peeking through a door at one another without doing any damage to one another, because he's very territorial and so is she. And they look and think, my God, it's true, it's not just a pretty voice, she's quite sexy. And the male is thinking this, and she's thinking, he's a good singer, I'm into him. And slowly but surely, a couple of days later, you pull the partition back further so they can, and you'll find over the next couple of days, he will actually start to feed her his chosen seeds. He'll peel the seeds for them. And it's quite sweet. He's feeding the female. Nothing changes. Not in my life anyway. And I think how sweet. And it's a joy to behold. It really is. And then you think, well, he's feeding her. You give it a go. And you pull, one day, you pull out this partition and you just cross your fingers and hope to hell they don't fight. They'll only fight if you've been a bit precipitous at pulling it out too fast. You've got to give it a couple of days so they fall in love through a slot. And if you got it right, and you provide them with the materials to build a nest, he'll start, and you provide them with the materials, as I say, he'll start to build a nest, and so will she. And then nature takes its course, and the next thing you know, oh, there's an egg. Okay, so that's the way to breed canaries, hopefully. But here's the deal, and the point I want to make by telling you that story. If I'd bought a cock and a hen and put them in a cage together with a partition, nothing wrong with that, you would think. They've got a partition. Okay? But if I next day go in like an idiot and just pull a partition out and say, right, go for it, you two, there will be a war. They will fight and hurt one another. They truly will, because they're not used to one another. Okay? And they have come from different houses, if you like. They think differently. She thinks like a female, he thinks like a male, his testosterone's on the go, and her ovaries are giving her hell. Okay? But who the hell is this upstart? You know, and suddenly you introduce them and there's a fight. That is exactly what Merkel did to Germany. She just opened the borders to the canary, or the cocks. Yes. And in they went. And it's ever likely there's disharmony. Now, two canaries will still fight. Okay? Because, hang on, somebody's invading his territory and she perceives as him invading hers. Well, we know that not to the case, don't we? We know, for example, if you were to open the borders in Dover and let them all come in, they're invading ours. There's no secrecy about that one. But there will be equal disharmony, and that's what's occurring. So we need borders. Okay? We need borders, we need language, we need to be on the same hymn sheet, and we need culture. And we've got three things there. Excuse me, I think I'm going to not throw up, but I think I'm going to sneeze in a minute. Due warning. We have borders, language and culture for a reason. Because we've got borders to keep us from fighting and to show a territory, as the canary does. He has his little cage. We have a language. We speak Canary. Okay, from Yorkshire. She might be a Yorkshire canary, but she might just be a canary, any old canary. He will breed with anything, personally. It doesn't have to be a Yorkshire canary, by the way. But I try to keep my bloodline pure. Well, isn't that always the case? And I know if I breed a yellow canary with a green canary, I'm going to get a mix. Oh yes, half-caste. Dare I mention the phrase. And we have a culture. Because they act differently. Their expectations are different. Their demands on the environment are different. Their food, what they prefer to eat, is different. This is what the borders, language and culture is. And this is what defines a country, folks. Borders, language and culture. And without all of that trio, we're screwed. And there's another one they throw into the mix. It's amongst the culture bit. Is the religion. Because if those three don't get you, the religion will destroy you. See, when you control those four things, religion, border, language and culture, you ain't got society. You have got a homogenized mess. And the people that have organized this were outcasts from Egypt for a very good reason. Because they tried to do it to Egypt. And they were cast out. And you talk about Muslims being a disruptive force around the world, trying to convert everybody to Islam. There's a far greater danger. And we haven't even been, it's been in our face since biblical times. The greatest danger. And we've accepted it, as they have in the Jewish states of America. United States of America, where the Federal Reserve is a standing joke. In America answers to Israel. You may as well call it the United States of America, because that's what it is. And you call me anti-Semitic. I've only told you what I've managed to glean. Some of it may be entirely wrong. I take it on the chin. But most of it's right. But few will admit it. And this is why they get away with suing people for being anti-Semites, and the Defamation League exists. The Defamation League prosecute people because they suppress the truth. Well, apparently the truth will set you free. Doesn't it? I'm not a hypocrite. And I call a dog and a spade a spade. But there's no way that you can convince me, ever, that when you, the old story, when you got two Jews together, you have three opinions. Oh, so true. But when you control the banking system, the law courts, the press, well, the media, you got it covered. You got every conceivable base covered. Do you know their Achilles heel? They haven't got a home. They are world squatters. Because their home, Babylon, was destroyed and they were cast out. For a bloody good reason. So, it's amazing though. Many of them are like those wibbly wobbly toys you can't knock down. They're insidious. As a concept, of a religion that is supposed to be so loving is the most warmongering religion on the planet, because it doesn't stop bearing a grudge. There is no forgiveness, my boy. And you can take that to the bank if you dare. Catch you tomorrow.